Now we bring you the remarkable story of lifelong Cardinals fan John O'Leary. 30 years ago, John endured a life-threatening injury at his home in St. Louis. But with the help of the team's beloved broadcaster, John not only survived, but has gone on to inspire others by sharing his story. And that story is about the power of perseverance, friendship, and baseball. We should warn you, some of the images you're about to see may be graphic in nature.
Well, good morning. Good morning.
Meet John O'Leary. He does this all the time. He tells people his story, and he starts it from the very beginning.
When I was a kid, I grew up 15 minutes away from Busch Stadium, and growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, there's basically one thing that we love. We love baseball. Life was good, the Cardinals were winning. This was 1987. It's a great year to be a Cardinal fan and to be a kid. Life is good. And then life changed. I'm dying, and then my door opens up, and then I hear this voice. And the voice says to me, "Kid, wake up. Kid, are you listening? Keep fighting."
The voice that spoke to John that day in the hospital was familiar. It belonged to my dad, Jack Buck.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
My dad called some of the greatest moments in sports history. But in St. Louis, he was always more than just a baseball announcer. On KMOX radio, he was the voice of the city. And that leads back to 9-year-old John O'Leary and that harrowing day 30 years ago.
My mom and dad were gone early on a Saturday morning, January 17th, 1987. I walked into the garage, come over to a can of gasoline, light a piece of cardboard on fire. Before the liquid even came out, the fumes pulled my little flame into the container, created a massive explosion, and then launches me 20 feet against the far side of the garage. I picked myself up, I ran on fire through the flames back into our house, screaming for help, praying for a hero. And that's when I see my brother Jim racing toward me.
John was in the entrance hall, lying on a pull rug on fire with about 2 to 3 feet of flames coming up above him. I took the rug and I wrapped it around him, then brought him outside. You're not prepared when you see your brother on fire.
That day, John O'Leary suffered burns to 100% of his body, 80% of which were third degree.
I listened to all that the doctor had said to us when he initially met us. After he finished, I said, "Are you saying that John has only a 50-50 chance of surviving this?" And he said, "You know, you undoubtedly are not hearing what I'm saying to you. John has less than 0.5% chance of surviving tonight."
The story quickly spread all across the news in St. Louis. It felt like John could have been anyone's kid or younger brother, even if you were part of baseball royalty, like Cardinal legend Red Schoendienst's daughter Colleen.
The next night was the baseball writers' dinner in St. Louis. And I had shared John's story and the O'Leary family story with my mom and dad. And Dad said, "You know, I have to go out of town tomorrow, but I'm gonna go over to the hospital after I get back in town." And so Jack was walking with us and he says, "Hey, Red, you want me to go over?" And that was it.
The day after I'm burned, I find myself laying in a hospital bed. My eyes are swollen shut, so I literally can't do anything except listen. I'm laying in this hospital bed and I hear footsteps walk in, a chair gets pulled across the floor, and then I hear this voice, a voice I recognized immediately. It's the voice of Jack Buck, and he says to me loud and clear into my darkness, "Kid, wake up, wake up. You are going to live, you are going to survive. Keep fighting, keep fighting."
So John did. He fought and fought his way back. And along the way, my dad came around several more times. One day even providing extra incentive by promising that if John made it out of the hospital, the Cardinals would have a day at Busch Stadium in his name. 6 months later, the kid who'd been given almost no chance to live made it to the park, and sure enough, they had John O'Leary Day to honor him. But that wasn't anywhere close to the end of the story. John still had a long road to recovery. Along with all the skin grafts and having to learn to walk again, John's fingers had been amputated, which meant he had to teach himself how to write again. And my dad took note of it.
2 days after John O'Leary Day at the ballpark, my mother goes out to the mailbox. She comes in with a brown box. She opens it, and inside is a baseball from Ozzie Smith. Below the ball was a note from Jack Buck that read, "Kid, if you want a second baseball, all you have to do is send a thank you letter to the guy who signed the first."
I said to John, you know, if you're going to get another one, you've got to do this. I can't write these thank you notes. So, bless his heart, he got that pen, and thank you, Ozzie, John O'Leary. So we sent that off.
And 2 days later, I'm at home. Mom goes out to the mailbox, comes in with a second box, a second baseball, a second note that reads, "Kid, if you want a third baseball, all you have to do." And I don't even read the rest of the note. I remember yelling, "Mom, bring me a pen." I mail it off, and a couple days later, I got a third baseball, and then a fourth, and a fifth. And by the end of 1987, a busy year for the Cardinals, 60 baseballs. Taught me how to write again, taught me how to use my hands again.
Coincidentally, in the middle of that summer, my dad got his own day in Cooperstown, New York. And maybe, not surprisingly, he found a way to take John up there on the stage with him.
This job transcends play-by-play.
As we tune in, he's delivering an incredible presentation. Right as we're pulling in the driveway, he says,
And a kid back in St. Louis now who's as gutsy as a person as I ever met, John O'Leary. I've tried to help, I've tried to...
The relationship continued for years after that. When John graduated college, my dad was invited to the graduation party. But the Cardinals had a game that night. Still, he had a gift dropped off.
I come over to it, have no idea who it's from, open it up, first the note, and the note reads, "Kid, this means a lot to me. Hope it means a lot to you too. Enjoy, it's yours." It's crystal clear. It's the baseball that he received when he went into the Hall of Fame.
You work for something all your life, and you're awarded the highest gift you can possibly be given in that field, and you give it away. And that's what he did for John. It was very moving.
The truth that I knew, and John O'Leary knew, and people across St. Louis knew, is that's who my dad was. Which is why it was so tough as his health began to deteriorate a few years later. He died on June 18th in 2002, when he was 77.
He was in the hospital for the better part of 5 months, leading toward his death. And I never went down there to visit Jack Buck because I never felt worthy of the attention and the love and the gifts and the grace that he had given me throughout his entire life. So one of the great mistakes in my life, and I learned it the day that I got the call that my friend had died, is that I'd never have an opportunity to say thank you for all that he gave. It's painful today to think back on. So our oldest is named Jack, and we named him Jack because I love the name. But the primary reason we named him Jack is because I wanted not only Jack Buck's legacy to live on, but more than that, I wanted my Jack to always have a shining example, a male masculine figure in his life on what real success looked like. And if he can look not only at his dad, I hope, but at Jack Buck on, achieving success, yes. But what Jack did outside of that broadcast booth is much more significant than anything he did inside of it.
John O'Leary still means a lot to the Buck family because he meant so much to my dad, which is why it always matters when I see John.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Awesome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks. What do you think Dad would think about little Joe hanging out with John O'Leary today in the booth overlooking Busch Stadium with the guys warming up?
I think he would be moved to tears. Not because I'm here. He'd be moved to tears because of you. He'd be moved to tears and so proud of you for what you did with this opportunity. He would be so much more impressed about you than you are about him. You have taken that little push and really made everybody proud, but most of all him.
Thank you.
Sometimes life can have a funny way of reminding us how far we've come. John O'Leary has accomplished a lot in his life. He's a successful businessman, an author, married to a beautiful woman who's the love of his life, with a wonderful family. And he travels around the world telling his story. And this day, he's telling it to a group of guys that represent such a big part
Hey guys.
of why he's never given up.
I grew up in St. Louis. I live in St. Louis, have 4 babies in St. Louis. They are huge fans of the men in the room. So am I.
It's just an amazingly touching story, and his message of never giving up and always having hope was something that always resonated with me. What he says and how he says it makes everybody hear it.
Why me? Why am I so lucky? Why am I so blessed? Why do I get to sit here with a bunch of other major leaguers, wear a Cardinal jersey, man? I am supremely blessed. I know it.
What an amazing life situation to have it begin with Jack Buck and all he did, and then full circle and have John be speaking to the Cardinals. Amazing.
I'm Matt.
I've heard. Nice to see you, man.
I appreciate you being here. That was awesome.
Thanks for sticking around and for coming in the first place. Here I am in front of a group of St. Louis Cardinals signing autographs for the very team that 30 years previously I was in a wheelchair in awe as they're signing autographs for me. Can I make it out to you?
Please do.
My mom and dad referred to my event as a child as John's accident. What I hope people hear when they hear me speak is this opportunity that we all have to wake up from accidental living to truly lead inspired lives. So people frequently ask me, if you could go back in time and blow out the flame, would you do it? The fire, that decision, the events that happened afterwards, the men and women who came into my life, they are the reason why I'm with you today. So when I go back and blow it out, or when I go back and change it, I want to change a thing.